You said yes again, you didn't want to. You knew, somewhere in the part of yourself that you've learned to ignore, that you didn't want to. But they asked with that particular tone, the one that carries a faint edge of come on, don't be like this, and so you said yes. You put on the thing, you got in the car, you walked in, and the moment the door opened, the noise, the heat, the press of bodies, the 20 conversations happening at once, something inside you just closed, not dramatically. You didn't spiral, you didn't run. You did what you always do. You found a wall, you positioned yourself near it. You held your drink like it was something to do with your hands, and you performed being fine. You smiled at the right moments. You laughed when the room laughed. You fielded the small talk with the practiced efficiency of someone who has been fielding small talk their entire life while quietly dying inside. And maybe nobody noticed, or maybe they did notice. Maybe someone leaned over at some point and said, "You okay? You seem a little quiet." And you said, "No, I'm great, I'm having fun." And you felt in that moment the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people and completely, utterly unreachable. That right there, that specific flavor of exhaustion, that's what this video is about. Not the theory of it, not the neuroscience dressed in clean language to make it feel manageable. The actual lived, brutal reality of what it costs to be a person who cannot do crowds. And more than that, why does it cost what it costs? Because the cost is real, and you've been paying it alone for a long time. Most people leave a party tired in a normal way, pleasantly drained, ready for sleep, the kind of tired that follows a good evening. This person leaves destroyed, and I don't mean that loosely. I mean, they get in the car and immediately feel something collapse inside them, a pressure finally releasing that they didn't realize they'd been holding for the last 3 hours. They drive home in silence, not because they're sad, but because they have nothing left, no words, no reactions. The tank is empty in a way that a normal night's sleep might not fully fix, and they've learned, through painful experience, not to schedule anything important for the morning after. The world calls this introversion. That word has been so softened, so made into a cute personality quiz result, "I'm such an introvert lol," that it stopped meaning what it actually means for the people who have it badly. For those people, social overstimulation isn't a preference, it's a physiological event. Their nervous system processes the world at a depth and intensity that most people simply don't. Every conversation, every ambient noise, every subtle shift in the room's energy arriving not as background data, but as foreground experience, demanding to be processed, cataloged, felt. And the terrible thing, the part that makes this genuinely hard to live with, is that they often can't explain it. Not in a way that lands. They say, "I'm exhausted," and people hear, "I didn't have fun." They say, "I need some time alone," and people hear, "I don't want to be with you." And over time, explaining stops feeling worth the effort. So they just stop explaining, they cancel, they make excuses. They develop a small, airtight vocabulary of deflections that let them opt out without having to perform a justification that nobody really wants to hear anyway. And here's what nobody sees: they grieve this. They genuinely grieve the version of themselves that could just walk into a room and be fine. They watch other people move easily through crowds, laughing, touching strangers on the arm, feeding off the energy of the room, and they feel something that is some complicated mixture of envy and alienation, and a very quiet sadness that they don't fully have language for. They want it, that's the part that really hurts. They want it and they don't, and they have never been able to make themselves want it, and they have spent years wondering what is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with them. Their nervous system is wired differently. But that knowledge, while true, does not make the Saturday night any easier. This one is subtler, and in some ways harder, because this person doesn't collapse from the sensory noise. They collapse from the emotional noise, which is something entirely different, and something that takes much longer to understand about yourself. They walk into a crowded space, and they immediately, involuntarily, start feeling things that aren't theirs. Not metaphorically. There's a couple near the food table who are doing the polite party version of a fight, perfectly pleasant on the surface, cold beneath it, and this person feels the tension before they've consciously identified it. There's someone across the room putting on a very good show of being okay, and this person's chest tightens in recognition. The general baseline anxiety that runs through any group of people performing social ease, the ambient hum of am I enough, am I liked, do I belong, this person absorbs it like it's their own. And the brutal part is that they don't know in the moment that it isn't. They just know they feel heavy. They feel sad vaguely for no nameable reason. There's a restlessness under their skin, a low-grade distress with no clear object. They look around the room for the source and can't find it because the source is everywhere and nowhere. It's the aggregate emotional weather of 40 people, all of it passing through them on its way to wherever it goes next. These people have often been told their whole lives that they are too sensitive. They take things too personally. They read too much into things. They need to develop a thicker skin. And they've spent years, some of them decades, quietly attempting to comply, trying to feel less, trying to build the wall, and the wall, for this type, never quite holds, because their nervous system wasn't designed for walls. It was designed for open doors, and no amount of willpower changes the architecture. What they need, what they have rarely been given, is someone who looks at the open door and says, "That's not a defect." That is actually an extraordinary thing to be. And the cost of it is real, and it's okay to say that the cost is real. The cost is real. It is exhausting to feel everyone in the room. It is exhausting to leave a party carrying other people's sadness home with you. It is exhausting to have no reliable way to explain any of this without sounding like you're describing a superpower you didn't ask for and can't return. Now we get to the one nobody talks about, because this one isn't flattering. It doesn't have a clean neuroscientific frame. It's just true. Some people hate crowds because crowds at some point genuinely hurt them. Not metaphorically, not in a vague emotional sense. Something happened in a crowd with many people present, in a context where there was nowhere to go and no way to make it stop, and the nervous system logged it. Filed it under this configuration of stimuli equals danger. And from that point forward, the nervous system has applied that rule consistently, automatically, without consulting the conscious mind first. So now they walk into a crowded venue, and their heart rate rises before they've had a single conscious thought about being afraid. They scan for exits, not because they're planning to use them, but because some very old, very efficient part of their brain has decided that knowing where the exits are is survival information. Their breathing gets shallower, their vision narrows slightly, and they are standing in a perfectly safe room at a perfectly pleasant event, feeling physiologically like something is about to go wrong. And then, and this is the part that breaks my heart a little, they hate themselves for it, because they know rationally that the room is safe. They know that the alarm is miscalibrated. They know that other people around them are just standing there, drinking their drinks, not drowning. And knowing all of that does absolutely nothing to make the alarm stop. Rationality does not have access to the amygdala. You cannot think your way out of a threat response. You can only wait for it to pass and hope that this time, unlike last time, you can hold it together long enough that nobody notices. The loneliness of this is staggering. Because it's invisible, because they're smiling, because they're managing it. Because from the outside they look like everyone else in the room, and from the inside they are doing something that takes enormous effort, something that has never once been witnessed or acknowledged by anyone, and they will drive home and they will not tell anyone, and tomorrow it will be another thing they just quietly endured. If you are this person, you know who you are. And I want you to hear this clearly. What you are doing, the sheer daily effort of it, is not nothing. It is not a character flaw. It is not something you should just be over by now. It is a very specific kind of hard, and you have been doing it mostly alone, and that deserves to be named. And then last one, and maybe the simplest, there is the person who doesn't hate crowds because of how they process sensation, or because they feel everyone's emotions, or because of something that happened once that their body hasn't forgotten. They hate crowds because crowds are relentlessly, aggressively, structurally shallow. And shallow for this person is not just boring, it's actively painful. They walk into the party and see the format, surface level exchange, 7 minutes each, nobody saying anything they haven't said 100 times, and something in them just gives up. Not dramatically, just quietly. A door closes, they're present technically, they're saying the words, but they're not there because there is nothing there to be there for. These people have been inside a real conversation. They know what it feels like when something genuine passes between two people, when someone says the thing they actually mean instead of the thing that's safe to say, when the surface cracks a little, and suddenly you're talking about something true. That feeling, that is what they came for, and it rarely happens in a crowd because crowds by their very structure prevent it. You can't go deep with 40 people in 2 hours, the format forbids it, so they leave, not in anger. Just in recognition, the math doesn't work. The evening cannot give them what an evening costs them to attend, and they go home, and people think they're antisocial or depressed or difficult, and they're not. They're just hungry for something specific that is genuinely hard to find, and they've stopped pretending that a room full of small talk is the same thing. Here is what I want to leave you with. Every single person in this video, the one who pays with their body, the one who carries the room's emotions home, the one managing the alarm no one can see, the one who has measured the return and found it wanting, every single one of them has spent most of their life being told in some form or another that the problem is them. Too sensitive, too quiet, too antisocial, too much, not enough, and they've believed it. Most of them have believed it, at least partly, for a long time. Because when a message is repeated often enough by enough people who seem to move through the world with ease, you start to wonder if they're right. If you're the broken one, if everyone else got a manual that you somehow missed, they're not right. The world is not one size fits all. It never was. And the cost of pretending otherwise, of performing okay when you're not okay, of saying yes when everything in you is screaming no, of walking into rooms that take something from you that you can never quite get back, that cost is not invisible, even when it's paid silently. You know what it costs, you've always known. Which one of these was you? Which one are you tired of carrying alone? Tell me in the comments, not because I'll fix it, but because sometimes the most important thing is just to say it out loud, where someone else might read it and recognize themselves and feel, for the first time in a long time, a little less alone in the room.